Hey friends, it's Joel Richardson, and this is The Underground. Welcome to this episode of The Underground, a program that explores the testimony of the biblical prophets, the gospel of Jesus Christ, current events, and how all of these things relate to you and me. Now, in this week's episode, we're just going to do a few very brief updates. This is going to be a very short program, but I did want to check in and give some updates in terms of what's going on in the future and what I've been up to even over just the past few weeks. So first of all, I want to sort of officially announce the tour. I've sort of mentioned it in passing a few times, but we are doing a tour. It's going to be April 9th through 18th, 2019. This is going to be with myself and Pastor Wes Martin of Grace Church in St. Louis. And we're going to be doing not just Israel, but also Jordan. And so if this is something that you think you might be interested in, I'm really looking forward to it, and I'm sort of gearing up, beginning to get ready and sort of make all the plans and so forth. Again, it's a little bit less than a year away at this point. But you can go to my website at joelstrumpet.com. The first banner that will pop up, the slider at the top of the page, you can click on that. That will take you to Living Passages Tours, and you can sort of look at the information, look at the different options. You can do just the Israel leg, or you can do the Israel and Jordan leg, and I'm just very excited about this, but we'll be talking about this more going forward. So an Israel-Jordan tour, April 2019. Okay, number one. Two, I know a lot of people have really been eager to hear more about the Saudi Arabian trip. Listen, I have been working nonstop. I mean, I get up at 4 in the morning, I start working all day. This has pretty much been my primary, everything's been directed toward this. I've been working on the book, and I'm pretty much half done at this point. So I'm recording this here. Yesterday was July 4th. I got back from Saudi Arabia on May 7th. So it's been about 2 months. The book is about half done. Like I said, working diligent. I have never been as excited about any of my books as I am about this. I genuinely think this may be sort of the most exciting, encouraging and inspiring of all my books. I mean, so I'm really excited about it. Essentially, what I'm going to do is break the book up into 3 sections. At least right now, this is what I think I'm going to do. So the first section is essentially a defense of Jebel al-Lawz in northwest Saudi Arabia as the real Mount Sinai. And I can tell you, the more that I've sort of dug into all of the various evidences, from the historical to the traditional to the biblical to the archaeological, just to the natural, geographical, I am absolutely 100% convinced that this is the real Mount Sinai. I mean, the case for Jebel al-Lawz in northwest Saudi Arabia as the real Mount Sinai, to me personally, it's just absolutely overwhelming. So I'm really excited to sort of just lay out the case for this. Now, let me just say this. This has been done quite a few times by different voices, different authors, and so forth. This is just my effort to sort of offer a very abbreviated argument in favor of this, but just to really simplify it. So anybody can sit down, understand all of the key relevant issues, archaeological, academic, linguistic, I mean, you name it. There's quite a range of different issues that go into this, arguments that go into this. I'm going to lay that all out. So that's the first part of the book. Part 2, I'm working through the biblical Exodus account and showing how, from the very beginning to the very end, the Lord is telling, he's using an analogy concerning a wedding, concerning a betrothal ceremony. And the imagery and the language of a wedding ceremony, of a courtship process, if you will, it is replete throughout the scriptures. It's a beautiful, amazing picture. And it really sort of paints for us the larger story of redemption that's unfolding throughout all of the scriptures. The Lord's working with Israel in terms of his larger promised plan to redeem all of creation. And then in part 3, I deal with Israel's, if you will, apostasy, their unfaithfulness to God, and ultimately their restoration, the Lord's plan to restore them. And I show how the return of Jesus is the ultimate clear fulfillment of the Lord's plan to restore Israel. And so I show how the biblical Exodus account, more than anything else in the Scriptures, lays out for us the clearest, most detail-rich, specific picture of the return of Jesus in all of the Bible. That all of the language in the New Testament, the Lord coming on the clouds with the trumpets, to deliver his people, to be enthroned to restore the throne of David. All of this stuff is completely rooted in the biblical Exodus account. So it's the most amazing, exciting, glorious, magnificent, as I said, detail-rich picture of the return of Jesus in all of the Scriptures. And I'm highlighting several particular passages which have almost never been dealt with. I mean, there's a few books out there that touch on these as passages that are referring to the return of Jesus, but for the most part, it's almost never touched. So I'm really excited about this. It's going to be glorious. It's going to be fantastic. As far as the movie, there's been dialogue, there's been ongoing discussions. I can't really give a lot more details about that, but there's a lot that's unfolding behind the scenes. We're going to be talking a lot more about this in the next year. If all goes well, there may be some more trips down the road. Again, if all goes well, please do pray that these things all come together. I may be stepping into a partnership with someone else in order to create a really fantastic, top-notch film. If it is something that you want to donate to, yes, we're still raising funds to try to put this together. You can go to joelstrumpet.com, click on partner, and there's several different options there in terms of supporting the film. So thank you so much. Okay, now I want to hit on something that is really the main point I wanted to just visit with you all today. And that is, I was just in Israel, and I was with Dalton Thomas. We were there with the One King tour, and then I got to go up and visit with Dalton, FAI Relief up in the Golan. And as probably many of you know, there is much happening right now in Syria. Okay, so I don't want to get too complex here in terms of all the things that are taking place, but essentially the revolution that began in Syria in 2011, it began in Dara, the Dara region. So in the south, pretty close to the border of Israel, the Golan is the Dara region. This is primarily Sunni Muslim territory. This is where the revolution began. And after 7 years, maybe as many as 1 million people dead. Official numbers are at about 500,000. That doesn't include a lot of the foreign fighters, and there's just a lot in the fog of war that gets lost. Regardless, we're dealing with 500,000 to several 100,000 dead. Since this time, finally, with Russian help, with Russian assistance, with Iranian help, Assad has really turned this thing around. Even to my surprise, I thought there was a certain point a few years ago where he was on his way out. And so the Assad regime, again, in coordination with the Russians, are devastating the Dara region. Now, from the Russian sort of narrative, and I have to say this too, because it's amazing how many American Christians, they have bought fully into the Russian propaganda narrative. The Russians have their side of the story. Everybody has their side of the story, but it's amazing how many American conservative Christians these days, they are completely buying into the sort of Russian propaganda machine. And they're not discerning that Russia has their agenda, that the United States has their agenda. And if Russia sort of puts out, and they're very good at it, putting out these conspiracy theories, it's amazing how many people fully, hook, line, and sinker, fully embrace all of these conspiracy theories, these anti-Israel conspiracy theories, these anti-American conspiracy theories, and really sort of prop up Assad as a hero. Listen, yes, before the revolution, Assad was someone who maintained a level of stability in the country. He was a dictator, and he had his foot on the neck of Christians and Sunnis and other minorities, but there was a relative measure of peace. And so the narrative is that really there was just these terrorists down in Dara. They started the revolution. They were all, Al-Qaeda, ISIS sort of terrorists and this sort of thing. And therefore, it's easy to get Americans on board with just sort of indiscriminately bombing entire regions and villages and so forth. Now listen, Are there some ISIS? Are there some Nusra? Are there some Al-Qaeda type of groups among these? Yeah, there are some, but the majority are not. And this is so important to recognize that on the ground, things are never as neat and clean as people like to portray them. You know, like you're either fully ISIS or you're on board. Like there is everybody on the spectrum. Everywhere in between. And so essentially, using that narrative, Assad and, again, Russia are now bombing the daylights out of Dara to the point where we now have, the numbers vary wildly, but let's just say we've got about 100,000 or more. Some numbers are as high as 200,000 Sunni Syrian Muslims who are fleeing to the real tight border in Rafid and several other areas along the Israeli border, because that is the no-fly zone. There's a no-fly zone. So these Syrian Muslims believe that if they get right up tight next to Israel, that they and their families will be safe. And you need to understand, these are children, these are families, these are, yes, there are some terrorists. I want to be clear. There's a percentage of Sunni terrorists. But in this thing, it's bad guys versus bad guys. And then there's a lot of innocent people caught in the middle, people who want nothing to do with terrorism or war and this sort of thing. And so here you have now maybe 100 to 200,000 people gathering on the border of Israel. I had a chance to go up to the border of Syria. We basically were 10 feet from the border, quite literally, with the IDF as we sent a doctor in to a particular village that is there in the south. And, this is just an amazing story. I mean, here's this young Bolivian doctor. The very day that we were sending him over the border into Syria, his wife sent him a video of his first child, his little girl, walking for the first time. So he's on his phone looking at a picture of his baby girl walking for the first time the day that he's going into Syria in the name of Jesus to serve Muslims in partnership with the IDF. He and his wife, he had just graduated from medical school. He and his wife determined that he would actually tithe the first 3 months after medical school in Syria and give that up as an offering to the Lord. He had been part of a pretty powerful move of God down there in South America. A lot of these Latino doctors, I mean, they just got all fired up and they're giving themselves to this. It's glorious in terms of their heart and what's going on. And it's an encouragement and inspiration to all of us as well. Now, with all that's unfolding, and again, this was all unfolding as we were there, as Assad suddenly really turning his wrath full throttle on the whole Dar region. You've got all these people moving down. The opportunities for ministry are tremendous. Again, when people are in crisis like this, the walls come down. Everything is turned. The whole narrative, some people's world are flipped on its head. Listen, for years, Assad exorbitantly taxed the Sunnis in the south, and they said, well, we need to sort of, get all of these finances from you because we need a strong military to protect you from the evil Israelis, right? All of a sudden, Assad is turning these very weapons that you paid for against you and your family, and he's bombing you and your villages. And Israel is sending in medical aid. Israel is sending in food. Israel is promising to protect you if you're up close to their border. The entire narrative has been flipped on its head. FAI is the only Christian organization that is officially in partnership with the Israeli Defense Forces to send in Christian doctors and aid workers to minister to the Muslims that are there on their border for the purpose of establishing friendly, good relations and a safe border on Israel's border. Now, of course, that's impossible when you have a few 100,000 people that have been uprooted, that are in the middle of war. But Israel is doing the right thing in terms of being salt and light and sending in aid. And FAI is, again, right in the middle of that in terms of sending in doctors, sending in aid, and the opportunity is tremendous. So the reason that I wanted to talk about this is because I wanted to say the financial and, of course, the prayer need is tremendous. If this is something that you want to partner with, you want to you just sort of sow this into this tremendous opportunity in our day, then you can go to fairelief.org. I'll put the link at the bottom of the YouTube video. I'll put it in on the video as well. fairelief.org. The need is tremendous right now. The need is tremendous for finances. The need is tremendous for more workers as well. If you've been trained medical field and you're willing to take some tremendous risks, or if you have maybe even some military training to sort of put yourself in some of these scenarios and you're interested in laying down your life for the sake of the gospel, then I would appeal to you, fairelief.org. This is a tremendous opportunity. I know of nothing else like it in the earth right now in terms of an opportunity to share the good news of the kingdom. Now, there's something else I want to just sort of touch on before I wrap this up, and that is as we talk about this program, Operation Good Neighbor, we often talk about the ministry that's taking place in Syria, and that's a huge part of the story. Obviously, that's the main part of the story. But there's another part of the story that I think it's important that it's told, and that is the relationship between FAI and the IDF. Because this is actually another part of the beauty of this story that, in my opinion, the Lord himself has brought together. So when we went up to send this doctor over into Syria as well, one of the doctors came out. So the IDF pulls one of the workers out, one of the team leaders, to sort of just debrief. There needed to just be some sort of, right there, just meetings to sort of work out logistics and different things. And so here is a young woman who's been in for several months, again, one of the team leaders, and she's debriefing. And a few of the Israeli soldiers come over. Now, these couple of guys, they were in their early 20s. I talked to one of the guys, he said he was 23. And as I watched this sort of interaction, this is a part of the story, again, that's rarely told, but I think it's as much part of what God is doing here as he is in Syria. And so here you have, and again, I want you to try to understand. Here's a young guy, and in talking to him, he said he was religious, so he's probably maybe Orthodox, and he's in the military. He's 23, and he comes over, and he's looking at this, again, young Christian woman who's risking her life on behalf of Israel in the most dangerous country in the world right now. And he said, "Yes, I would like to ask you some questions." She's like, "Okay." And he said, "Why do you do this? Why are you doing this?" And with all authority, she just immediately starts expressing her reasons for doing this. And it was just interesting to watch the interaction. There is a tremendous opportunity here for salt and light, for an effective witness on behalf of FAI to many of these young Israeli soldiers, and even those that are overseeing it, the generals and so forth on the front lines. So after she had this conversation, it was just powerful to watch her communicate her reasons. Why is she risking her life? And he said, do you think it's making a difference about how the world feels about us? You could see the concern in his eyes for how the world views Israel. The whole world is just sending out this propaganda, demonizing Israel in the most negative ways. And she said, I think so. I think people are seeing what Israel is doing. And he said, he was pretty honest. He said, "I don't think so. I don't think there's hope." He said, "You really believe there's hope?" And she said, "Yeah, I do. Otherwise, I wouldn't be doing it." She said, What do you think?" And he said, "I don't think there's hope. I don't think there's hope." So here's, again, a young guy. And, I don't care if you're an American Baptist or a conservative Orthodox Jew. You're in the military. You're in a different world as, a young guy, 18, 19, a young gal. It can be a dark world. It can be a world full of cynicism and hopelessness. And so I appreciated his honesty there. And then I had a chance to sort of go over and talk to him. And I said, "Listen, here's a village of people, again, with their wives, with their children, and their back is against the wall, so to speak. They don't have anywhere to go. And you have the Russian military coming down on you." And I said, it reminds me of a story in, we call it Exodus, they call it Shemot. The story of the Israelites. They've got their back against the Red Sea. And here are the Israelites. They had just left Egypt, right? They have their wives. They have their children. They have nowhere to go. They have the ocean on one side. And barreling down on them is the most powerful army in the world. The most powerful army in the world at that time. The Green Berets of Pharaoh's Egyptian military. And the Israelites probably thought there was no hope. but for God, right? The Lord rips the ocean in half because of his compassion for Israel. Now, I don't know what the Lord has in store for some of these villages, for some of these districts in southern Syria, but I know that as long as God is real, and he is, there is hope. And I am fully convinced that the Lord is going to awaken and call out a tremendous remnant out of this suffering people, because that is the nature of how the Lord works. And so I reminded this young Israeli soldier of the mighty acts of what God has done in the past. And I said, if he could do it then, he can do it now. And then I just went on and I explained, listen, I said, I'm a Gentile. My hope, sort of, I guess you could say, well, I'm a Christian. And so immediately as soon as you say, well, you're Jewish, I'm a Christian, then there's sort of this tension where we're supposed to be sort of in conflict. I said, listen, so I didn't say it that way. I'm a Christian. I said, yes, I am a Christian. But I explained it this way. I said, listen, I'm a Gentile. My hope is in the hope of Israel. My hope is in the covenants of Israel. My hope is in the God of Israel. My hope is in the Moshiach of Israel, the Messiah of Israel. And my hope is in the restoration of the throne of David, that when the Messiah himself restores the throne of his father David. And so in the Bible, it says the gospel of the kingdom, right? This is the term used in the New Testament, the gospel of the kingdom. What is that? It is the good news concerning the restoration of the kingdom of Israel with the Messiah on the throne. And so in that age, because this is what I'm looking forward to, this is what my hope is rooted in that age, those who are in Messiah, who are poor, needy, forgotten, afflicted, rejected, hated, outcast, all of these things, they will be cared for. They will be comforted. And because that's the nature of the kingdom, we do these things in this age. We demonstrate love for the poor. We demonstrate sacrifice for the needy, the afflicted, the forgotten. And so it was a blessing for me to sort of appeal, again, to this young IDF, again, Orthodox soldier, and say that you, as a Jew who are called to be salt and light to the Gentiles, you are called to demonstrate the nature of this coming kingdom, this kingdom to come, again, in Messiah. And so it was just good to communicate. It's just sort of a part of the story that's not often told, but there's just beautiful relationships that are taking place, and as people are interacting in a very rare and unique way. So it's for that reason. It's for that reason, on top of the ministry that's taking place, obviously in Syria, some of the most needy, desperate people in the world right now. But it's for all of these reasons that I fully support and appeal to you to support what's taking place right now up there on the border. So you can go to fairelief.org. The need is tremendous, but again, not just for finances, but also for workers and obviously for prayer. So with that, I think I've gone long enough. I always say I'm going to be brief, and then I always talk way too long. But I did just want to give those updates. We'll be back here real soon. Just, again, more exciting things to talk about. But until then, I just want to thank you so much for being with us this week. As always, I look forward to seeing you next week. Until then, I'm Joel Richardson, and this is The Underground.